We're going to get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Andrea, and this is my teammate, Sean.
Hi there.
We're going to be going over implementation best practices. So an overview of what we'll be going through today. We're going to be talking about what to track, the difference between events and properties, what's an implementation spec and why it's important that you make one, naming conventions, how to name events and properties, and we're going to show you a sample project at the end where all of these have been implemented properly, and we're going to show you how effective it's going to be. So let's go ahead and start with what to track. So this is going to be different for every single one of you. The most important thing with trying to figure out what to track is to outline your business goals. So for example, if some of you have attended some of our webinars before, we go through a project called Music Finder. Music Finder is a song playing platform, and one of the business goals on that platform is to see how much money we're making. So then I would need to learn if users are actually purchasing my songs. How do your users purchase songs? They would have to sign up, play a song, play so many songs, and then do song purchase. So I want to make sure that I'm tracking all of those things. I want to make sure I'm tracking if a user has signed up, if they have played a song, if they've purchased the song. So I want to make sure that's all there in my project. With Mixpanel, it's actually going to be really tempting to track everything. And that's something that we actually do not suggest. Some customers always just want to track everything and see where it goes. Tracking everything on your site will create really busy data. It'll create a lot of noise in your project, and you're going to have to do more work at the end trying to figure out which events lead to your business goals. So we don't actually suggest that you track it all. We suggest that you focus on your business goals and make sure that those actions are tracked. So in Mixpanel, we believe that actions speak louder than page views. This is because page views don't tell the whole story. So with Mixpanel as an event-based tracking and analytics, we tell you that what gives you more information is what your users actually do on your site. So we suggest that you track actions that lead directly to your business goal. So for example, I mentioned that we would like to track song purchased or how much money we're making. So I want to make sure that I'm tracking every time somebody buys a song. Does that make sense? Do you guys, if there's any questions, please go ahead and type them into the question box. We do have somebody manning the questions to go ahead and answer if you have any questions during this time.
We're going to keep moving forward for now, and we'll get to your questions either through the chat or at the end of this presentation. But the next thing we're going to talk about is the difference between an event and a property. So an event, which if you're familiar with Mixpanel, I know some of you might be, some of you might not be, is any action that a user performs on your website or your mobile app. You can define this to be anything. So examples would be a page view, song played, click sign up, for example. These are all things that you can define as an event. Then we have properties. There's a couple types of properties. First one, we'll talk about our event properties. Event properties are details about an event. So you can have an event called song played, for example, and a perfect event property for this would be song name. So this is a good way to describe basically the actions that your users are performing with information that's valuable for that specific action. Another type of a property is called a super property. So this is a special type of an event property that is something that you want to apply globally, basically, in your Mixpanel project. You want every event that comes in to have this property attached to it. So a good example that I can think of is plan type. So if you have users that are premium and free, you can store plan type as a super property. Then every event that that user does will let you know what plan type they had during that event. Does that make sense? Moving on to describe these types of properties even further, there's 5 types that Mixpanel actually accepts. The first one is string, which is just any type of text that you send in. Then we have numbers, we have dates, we have booleans, so that's true and false, and then we also have lists. So list would be like a good example if you were storing like like shopping cart, for example, then you could have all the items that are in a user's shopping cart stored as a list. The next thing I want to touch on was the other half of Mixpanel, which is people. So Mixpanel is split into events and people, and what people encompasses is user profiles. Whenever a user makes an account on your app or your website, or whether they don't or do is up to you, but you can create a profile for them at any point. And a profile is a collection of events that a specific user has done, and also a collection of properties that describe that specific user. So there's people properties, just like there are event properties, and good ones would be name, email, stuff like that you would want to describe your users with. One thing to keep in mind about these people properties is that they behave a bit differently than event properties. When you have event properties, they describe that action when it occurred. People properties, on the other hand, they reflect the current state a user's in. So for example, if you have an event property plan type, that will reflect the plan type when that event was fired. However, if you had a people property plan type, that would reflect the user's current plan type. So the people properties change over time, whereas the event properties are static. The next thing we're going to talk about are special or reserved properties. There's some properties in Mixpanel that we have specified as reserved properties because they are used in our reports and they're used in other parts of our product. A few examples of these are name, email, and phone. We store these in our backend as $name, $email, and $phone. What the $sign signifies is that this is a reserved property. So when you send it in, you want to be sure you send it in with the $sign. And one example of how we use these reserved properties is that for $email, if you decide to send messages through Mixpanel, $email is where we pull your users' email addresses to be able to send them those messages.
So the next thing that we're going to be going over is an implementation spec, and what it is, why is it so important for you to make one. So an implementation spec is it's a sheet that outlines your business goals and your analytics questions while setting up Mixpanel. So with your business goals outlined, you will continue on to clarify and outline all the events that your users need to do to directly correlate to achieving those business goals. With every single event, you will outline the event properties and the super properties and the people properties that are all aligned with all of those business goals. So let me show you an example of a implementation spec that we currently have. So this is an implementation spec. This is specific to our Music Finder project. As you can see, we have the event name here, and we also have the key performance indicator that the analytics that we actually would like to know. So how many % of the registration go to sign up, and the number of signups by attribution source. So I want to see which signups are coming from where, if it's a lead, a campaign that we actually did. So the trigger is the actual action that needs to happen on your platform when a user signs up. And so on Music Finder, this would be clicking the actual sign up button. So as for the properties with sign up, we want to register name as a super property and their email address as a super property. And we can see here that it's actually a string as a name and a string as their email. We also want to set people properties, their name, their email address, the way that they registered, which is all strings, the registration date as a date type. And we also have plan types, a string, which is also registered as a super property and or people property. So you're going to want to outline all of your business goals as well as the events that perform these goals and help you achieve them, as with all the details that you want to capture for every single event. Does anybody have questions regarding that? please let us know. Angela on the chat can get to you, or we can get to this during or after the presentation. Okay, we're gonna keep on going with naming conventions. So how do you exactly name your events? Is it going to be too broad or too narrow? So for example, let's look at page view versus home page view versus click. So an event can be too broad. So for example, click. I understand that that's an action that your user does, but it doesn't tell you what they're clicking on. Yes, you can describe a click with properties, but however, it's not going to tell you much of that event. Homepage view. Homepage view is actually pretty good. It tells you which page that they're looking at. However, I'm not quite sure. It also can be too narrow. The best way we suggest to implement this is a page view. Then you can set a property such as page name, and then specify if it was the home page, if it was the play page, or if it was the checkout page if you're doing e-commerce. One thing that we absolutely highly recommend doing is using lexicon. Lexicon is a feature in Mixpanel that lets you describe every single event within Mixpanel, which means that if you have other team members who don't really understand how you've implemented Mixpanel and all the events there, you could go ahead and add a description with every event so that everybody who jumps into your Mixpanel project is on the same page.
So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into a project that was built on the spec that Andrea just showed you, which was for this music finder, and we can take a look at what that kind of project looks like and what kind of events we have tracked in that project. So first of all, I'm just going to pull up insights really quick, give it a second to pop up. Here we go. These are the events that we're firing. So we have a song play. So this touches on what Andrea said about an event being too narrow or too broad. Something that's too broad would have been like action performed. Something too narrow would have been like a specific song played, Aerosmith song played, for example. Here we just called it song played, and we have properties then within that song play that can describe what the action actually is. We have a song purchase, we have a sign up page view, we have a sign up, plan upgrade, newsletter sign up, and a plan downgrade. So these are all the events we have. Jumping into this drop down selector, if you actually notice, two of these icons are green. What these green icons signify is that a lexicon definition has been added to this event. So this touches on what Andrea just mentioned, how powerful lexicon can be. So if I was the person who implemented my company's Mixpanel setup, I might have an event with a name that maybe other people don't understand exactly what it means. In this case, plan upgraded is a little self-explanatory, but for the sake of the example, this is the event I want to use. So by hovering over plan upgraded, I now get this definition that is filled in where it says plan upgrade, triggered when a user clicks upgrade plan on their homepage. Important properties include plan type. So this is just some useful information that was added via lexicon to this event. Newsletter sign up also has a lexicon definition. So here you're seeing triggered when a user subscribes to our newsletter. We have 4 different types of newsletters, so the type can be found under the title property. Now, when working with lexicon, you can actually add it right here by clicking on the app launcher button and then selecting lexicon. And I'll let that pop up really quick. And here you can see all of the definitions we've created. So you can always add a description. You pick an event and then you can describe it in there. Now, what I want to show you guys is a funnel. And this goes into the very first point we brought up, which is identifying what are your business goals and how Mixpanel tracked events can give you those answers. So I'm going to jump into a quick 2-step funnel, song play and then song purchase. So I'm seeing that 57% of users who played a song then went on to purchase one. So this is a pretty useful metric, but one thing that was brought up was like, what if I want to see by region, for example, so that I can click on country and I'll see that it looks like I'm really struggling in getting users from Mexico and Canada, but US is doing all right. So maybe I can focus on those regions. Furthermore, you could also go like genre, for example, and you can see we have a pretty good conversion across the board, but it seems like a lot more people are listening to hip hop than are listening to classical. So maybe our classical library needs a little bit of help, or maybe we need to target a different demographic. So these are the kind of questions you can have answered through funnels. I'm going to take a quick pause here, and if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. If we can talk about more use cases, we can talk about having a tracking plan or an implementation spec, whichever you prefer. We can go into all sorts of different questions. So just send them in the chat, and I'll be happy to talk about any of these questions that pop up. While we wait for any questions, I'll just I'll show another funnel really quick, just so we have one up there. Sign up and upgraded. So if I remember correctly, this is a sign up and upgraded where it's only looking at people from the United States using Chrome. So if I jump back in, so it looks like we have a lot of people who view our sign up page and then sign up, but not too many that are upgrading. So if we actually click on sign up, I can see that it takes people on average 60 seconds from when they view our sign up page to actually signing up. Then I'll click on plan upgraded, and I'll notice it takes them 3.85 days on average to actually upgrade their plan. So maybe this is a stumbling block. It's worth investigating to see why this is taking so long, or why people just aren't doing this action at all. So this is something that like Mixpanel can help surface for you, that like it's taking a long amount of time for people to commit to upgrading, so maybe we should look into it further. Likewise, you can also segment this data by other properties as well. So like I'll do city just for the sake of seeing it, and I can see like which cities are converting at the highest rate versus which aren't. We can see plan type. So we're seeing that most people are signing up as free users, with 80 of them signing up as premium. So that could be something that's affecting our metric because they're signing up as premium.
So they wouldn't necessarily upgrade their plan.
Exactly.
We just got a question. Can you talk a bit about the best approach for structuring the Mixpanel implementation? And when should something be considered an event versus a property?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Lei. So earlier we suggested that an event is an action, and it's an action that directly correlates to your business goal. And also an action is something that your user performs on your site. So for example, on our Mixpanel site, users can click to play a song, they can click to purchase a song. So those would be the events, the direct actions themselves. So again, a property is a descriptive, something that describes the event or the action. So when they click song play, and song play is the event, I want to know what song they played, who was the artist that they played, what genre was it in. Those are all descriptives of that event. So therefore, we would go ahead and set those as properties. As far as structuring Mixpanel for the implementation, again, this is something that is really, it's customizable to what your business goals are. So make sure that the event is an action that your users can do, and then properties are describing that action. Does that answer your question, Lei?
Just to build on that, even if you already have an implementation set up, I think it's a good practice to go ahead and fill out one of these implementation specs, because that way you can see what you're tracking right now, and you can also prepare for what you might want to track in the future one day. So your implementation spec isn't just something you do when you're first starting. It's something you make when you're first starting, yes, but you can also create it later on and update it over time, because it should always show everything you decide is an event and a property. That way you can always share this with your colleagues, and they'll know exactly what your implementation is like, and you can know what you can get out of it, what you can't get out of it, and what you should do to start answering those questions you can't currently answer. Has also been shared in the chat, so if anyone wants to fill one out, they can just go ahead and like make a copy of it, and they'll be all set.
Thanks for the question, Lei. That's a great question. We're
going to allow a bit more time for questions, and we'll see if anyone has. Oh, looks like we have a follow-up. Some confusion around property versus keys.
I can answer that part of it.
Yeah, Lei, sounds like a specific to your use case, and I'd be totally happy to talk to you about that. So if you send in an email to support@mixpanel.com, then we'll be able to figure out exactly what you're trying to track, and we'll be able to work with you and your dev to make sure that we sort that all
on
out.
the same page.
Yeah. But in general, mirroring what Andrea said, anything that you view as a valuable action to your company's business needs, that's a great starting point to create that as an event. Anything that describes what's happening, you want to leave those as properties. So in our music finder, we have a plan upgraded, which is like an event and an action that we're trying to drive our users to do. So because of that, we've created plan upgrade as an event. From there, we have all sorts of properties to track them, which is city, name, email. These are things that we associate with the upgrade, but they aren't actions themselves. So we're not tracking those as events. We're just tracking them as properties.
Does anybody have any more further questions?
If there aren't any further questions, we're going to send out a follow-up questionnaire after this webinar ends that includes the recording as well as a Google form. If you have any questions, you can always put them in that Google form. And tomorrow at the same time, we'll be here for a Q&A session in which we'll answer any questions that came in via the web form, via the Google form, sorry, and any questions that you guys want to ask in chat. So feel free to fill out that form and also check out the video on YouTube since it'll be posted after this presentation is done.
Yeah. There aren't any more questions. I guess we can give you some more of your time back for the morning. We'll go ahead and reach out to you via email. If you guys are actually interested, there is also a video ready for implementing Mixpanel on JavaScript. This is actually more geared towards developers because we actually walk you through how to enter track calls onto your website. So also this would actually mean that you have access to your source code. So this is something that you're hosting by yourself and not through a third party. So to enter Mixpanel track calls. If you're interested, the video is in the chat. We've shared that with you. You could share that with your developers as well, just to see if they can understand it and go through that with them. And if you have any more questions, please don't send it into that forum, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Have a great day. Bye.